Prisons aren't a nice experience. Well, they aren't meant to be a vacation, but if you are a cop, then things are about to get a whole lot messier. After all, you could be the reason that some of these folks are here, and the welcome that they are going to give you is not going to be something that you would want to experience. Have you ever watched one of those dark crime shows like BBC Two called Line of Duty? About corrupt police officers who endure the worst kind of bullying in prison? And how about those times when Lindsay Denton was scalded with boiling water in what's supposed to be a friendly cup of tea? Or when she's offered food that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy? But how much of that is Hollywood hype, and how much is the honest-to-goodness truth? Prison Life says Carl Cattermole, who practically wrote the book on the subject, isn't as vicious as it's portrayed on television. But if you're a cop, the rules are different. Cattermole explains the unwritten law is simple. Hurt predators, hurt cops. Ex-police officers probably won't feel very welcomed here. However, the over-dramatized shows on television mislead us in this respect. How likely is it that a former police officer will end up among non-police inmates? According to Neil Sam Samworth, a former guard who has worked in one of England's harshest prisons, the chances of survival are little to none. Inmates' professional histories are scrutinized during the intake process. If you identify as a former police officer, you'll be sent to a separate section of the prison before you can utter Miranda rights. So think about being a cop and ending up on the wrong side of the bars. What would you do first? Our first piece of advice is to stay away from the masses. The predators are probably your best bet, Carl explains. Although it's a scary prospect, it's better than being in a traditional prison wing where every hello could be a prelude to a punch. Sure, it's not the Ritz, but the odds of you getting attacked are significantly smaller, says Sam, a former guard at Strangeways, one of England's harshest prisons. The prison's medical unit is an option for those who don't feel comfortable sharing cells with sexual offenders. Picture a locked-down miniature hospital. We once had an ex-cop working as a cleaner there, Sam said. An ideal job, in other words. You're active, keeping yourself busy with mundane tasks like laundry and cleaning the bathroom while staying out of trouble. The man, who was otherwise in good health, held his job throughout his whole 3-year sentence. The inmates are sick and weak, thus the prison is not as dangerous as others. It is true that some former police officers have chosen a riskier lifestyle. You'd be surprised how many turn down the offer for a safer environment, choosing instead to roll the dice in a typical prison wing, adds Sam. Now we can consider a different tactic, moving from one location to another. Did you ever have to make an arrest in Manchester? Potentially your time in prison will be better spent in Cornwall. Sam argues that when you move to a new area, you reduce the odds of running across people you know, whether they're nice or not. It's possible that being silent or keeping under the radar is the best defense that you have. Sam cautions to never ask someone why they're in prison. It's the first rule of prison life. It's possible that you're digging yourself a hole that you can't escape. Have you ever pondered whether jail life is really as secretive as we imagine? Carl says that secrecy is more difficult than it seems. Forget seedy back alleyways, in today's prisons nearly everyone has access to a phone. One Google search could reveal everything about your history. If your cover narrative doesn't hold water, Carl says, you're asking for trouble even if you lay low. You may think that someone would have to really get under your skin before they started digging into your life, but you'd be shocked at just how much curiosity can drive others. It's not like you can stroll in here with any old story and expect people to buy it, Sam says. Newspaper articles have been known to be the final straw for some people. And what about the terrifying moment when someone's food is tampered with, as depicted in pretty much every prison drama? In actuality though, correctional officials have been cracking down on this. Sam described the facility's ingenious setup, saying things like, the kitchen is miles from the cells. Because the workers who load the trays onto the food carts have no idea where the trays are going, there's less of a risk that former police officers or other vulnerable inmates could be served tainted food. We shouldn't, however, exaggerate the situation. Most prisons, they're not fight clubs, despite popular belief and the portrayal of prison life in crime dramas. Carl maintains that the cycle of violence and anarchy is not permanent. They believe everything is a whole madhouse, from the violence to the substance use. But the truth some of your inmates have been arrested for failing to pay fines or for stealing food. I'm not joking when I say that I've heard of a guy who was on the prowl for bacon to feed his family. Now, let us give you some examples of cops who ended up behind bars and what happened to them. Say hello to Natalie Mottram, a 24-year-old native of Warrenton, Pennsylvania, who has been in conflict with the law. A trained intelligence analyst, Natalie was no ordinary person. Not just anywhere, though, she was seconded to the Northwest Regional Organized Crime Unit for the time being. However, she was apprehended by the National Crime Agency, the NCA, in a 2020 undercover operation codenamed Venetic. Why? The expedition was in jeopardy because of her release of vital information. The story opens with the NCA conducting a huge operation to shut down the criminals' favorite encrypted messaging service, IntroChat. But not long after they began, someone sounded the alarm. Natalie was in the center of the spill. After Natalie betrays her agency, she spills the goods to her buddy, Jonathan Carrier, who, at 34, is already engaged in questionable dealings. She tells him that the NCA is not only following him, but has also entered IntroChat. This was not an inconsequential discovery, it was the information that could destroy the entire operation. Things started to heat up from there. A buddy of Jonathan's, who must stay nameless for legal reasons, begins snooping around IntroChat on April 24, 2020. Eventually, he sends a message to another acquaintance claiming, "Hey, I know someone on the force and he says they're monitoring IntroChat. The messages may now self-delete, a feature they call burns, so he urges him to exercise caution before sending any geographical details. The NCA has been on Natalie the whole time. They set her up with phony information at the office and follows her when she clocks out. After clocking out, she went straight to Jonathan, her trusted accomplice and companion in crime. This meeting was the last straw. Investigators from the NCA were able to piece together that Natalie and Jonathan spent 2 hours together in the same house, most likely hatching additional wicked plots. Well, the cops carried out a raid and the two ended up in jail together that day, when police discovered an astounding $200,000 in cash between the two of them. Think of Natalie Mottram incarcerated. You could assume that she faces serious consequences as a former intelligence analyst turned informant. But don't get too excited. It's not quite that easy. The National Crime Agency, renowned for capturing major criminal figures, made the arrest. That means she was hanging out with some heavy hitters, including crime bosses and kingpins. For all she knows, that may be her path to a luxurious prison cell. Just imagine, when Natalie enters the jail yard, a few of the convicts cast her a suspicious glance. They whisper, "Isn't she a cop?" The word goes out though that she was the insider who nearly managed to keep their employers off the streets. Suddenly, she's not just another prisoner, she's Natalie Mottram, the rebel analyst who formerly worked for the major leagues. Old grudges are hard to let go of, especially when you're locked up. So it's possible that some people may still harbor resentment towards her. But suppose she sits down with them and explains why she ended up in jail to begin with. There's a good chance that she'd earn more than grudging respect. Among the inmates, she may find that she is respected, if not idolized. Natalie may be on her way to becoming prison rich in a society where prestige is valued more highly than money. But not all officers get the VIP treatment. After all, the example we talked about earlier wasn't the experience of your everyday cop. First and foremost, it's a big change to go from being a cop to a prisoner. The insignia and uniforms have been taken away and ordinary jail garb has taken their place. The badges of office they formerly wore are now painful reminders of their new status quo. It won't be simple for the cops to adjust to the new circumstances. They meet several different types of inmates while within the jail walls. Potential tension and hatred could arise if several individuals were previously arrested. They may find solace in the fact that others understand their predicament. Making friends and understanding the prison social structure are constant challenges. Prison officer safety is a top priority for law enforcement. Due to their past occupation, they are often a more obvious target. They may need to keep a low profile, not talk about their background, and ask for help from other convicts or guards in order to stay safe behind bars. The effects of incarceration on one's mental health are devastating. These law enforcement officials may feel guilty for breaching the public's trust and may have to face the repercussions of their conduct. Many people who work in law enforcement engage in introspective processes. questioning the paths they've taken. For some incarcerated police officers, jails have become a place of redemption and renewal. They engage in classes, therapy, or vocational training with the intent of re-establishing themselves and making a positive contribution to society once they're released. This process of change can be difficult and full of learning opportunities. However, not every cop decides to get help. Even while locked up, some prisoners maintain their combative stance. They may become more cynical or resistant to change as a result of their time behind bars. In spite of everything, police officers in jail often find time to bond with one another. They could find comfort in talking to those who have experienced similar things. These connections might help them feel less alone and more accepted in a setting where they may otherwise feel like an outsider. The confines of a jail system present their own difficulties. Prison life may be challenging for everyone, including ex-law enforcement professionals, due to factors such as overcrowding, a lack of resources, and harsh conditions. Inmates face the challenges of adjusting to prison life while holding on to their individuality and respect for others. Inmates who have served as police officers rely heavily on visits from loved ones. These bonds serve as a lifeline for the outer world and a rock of emotional stability. However, incarceration can place a significant burden on their relationships. Basically, it's about the individual experience of each cop. If you were truly that bad and had ties with organized crime, then there is hardly anything that could harm you in prison. After all, it would be like them hurting one of their own. It would be all rainbows and roses for you. Well, not exactly, but you guys get the point. But if you were a cop who did their duty well, at least in the beginning, then you should be ready for a world of trouble. There's one thing that inmates hate more than snitches, and it is cops who put them in there. After all, they were the reason behind them getting locked up, and now they finally get a chance to return the favor. So life for such cops is going to be tough, and as we mentioned earlier, it's just better to keep a low profile. Think that they're BA, well then they should prepare for a world of pain, because they're not coming out of prison in one piece. So stay on the right side of the law, folks, because you aren't going to love what's on the other side.